Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Renegade Immortal episode number 178 based on novel. So let's start. It was pitch black outside, and the roar of wind could be heard from inside the crack. The crack seemed like it was a world of its own, and the roar from outside was the only sound in the world. The endless suction force came from the pit as if it wanted to devour everything. Wang Lin sat in the lotus position inside the crack, looking out into the darkness. He seemed to have fused with the darkness. All that was left was the occasional lightning that flashed across his eyes that light up the crack. Being trapped here caused a sense of loneliness to gradually appear in his head. It was as if he was isolated from the world and forgotten by everyone. The only thing that accompanied him were his memories of his 800 years of cultivation. Lonely people always remember every single person that appeared in their life. Wang Lin's loneliness deepened as he recalled the past. It was as if he was hiding in a certain time, recalling the past, or hiding in a secret location, thinking about someone he cared about. A mutter came from Wang Lin in the dark. I wonder if anyone is cleaning father's and mother's tomb. A small, white ball was floating before Wang Lin. The light from the ball was very weak, so weak that it couldn't light anything up in this darkness. However, there was a warmth coming from the white ball. The warmth moved through Wang Lin's eyes and into his heart. Like a soft whisper, it gently filled Wang Lin's loneliness. There was always a faint figure inside the small ball that silently accompanied Wang Lin. Together they withstood the darkness and the howling. Even if the sky and heaven and earth shattered, the sea dried up, or the rocks decayed, that figure would always be there for Wang Lin through the ages. Even in reincarnation it would accompany him. The inside of the crack was still cold. It was as if all the warmth inside had been sucked away through the opening of the crack. However, with the existence of the white ball, the warmth in Wang Lin's heart filled his body and seemed eternal. Wang Lin, who had fused with the darkness, raised his hand and the white ball slowly landed in his palm. The white ball flickered and gave off a gentle light. This made Wang Lin experience the long-lost feeling of happiness. Everyone's happiness is different. My happiness is to accompany my parents, to accompany Wan. Wang Lin's eyes were filled with bitterness. That happiness was so extravagant and difficult. No one knew that deep within the demon spirit land, inside this bottomless pit, there was a man struggling against fate and the loneliness in his heart. Wang Lin had sat inside this crack for 3 years. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave, but during these 3 years, the suction force outside reached an unimaginable degree. More than 2 years ago, when Wang Lin was examining wealth, the suction from the pit suddenly increased violently. Now more than half of the crack was affected by the suction force. The Celestial Guard spell originally gave him 60% chance of leaving, but with the sudden increase in suction force, it immediately went down to 20%. Wang Lin didn't lose hope but calmly waited the next 2 years. After his cultivation reached the ascendant stage, his progression slowed down. After all, the ascendant stage was the peak of the first step. Even with how vast the cosmos was, how many people had reached the peak of the first step? Aside from those people favored by the heavens, who didn't spend countless years to reach this peak. Wang Lin's talent was very ordinary. If it wasn't for his determination and some special experiences, it would have been very difficult for him to reach this point. Mid-stage ascendant, late-stage ascendant, and peak late-stage ascendant were 3 chokes that blocked countless cultivators and depleted countless people's lives. They were 3 mountains that blocked Wang Lin's path. In these 2 years, Wang Lin used a calm heart to slowly comprehend what was inside wealth. There was only one sword tactic inside wealth, just one. Heaven chop. One day after the 2 years, Wang Lin withdrew his divine sense from wealth. Wealth completely disappeared as if it had completed its lifetime goal of passing on its inheritance and returned to where it came from. The only thing that remained in Wang Lin's heart was the shocking sentiment that he had comprehended for 2 years. After that, what waited Wang Lin was endless loneliness and silence. He spent every day sitting in the lotus position and looking quietly at the darkness outside. The sound from the suction roared in his ears while he looked at the darkness and sat there motionlessly. A soft sigh came from Wang Lin's bag of holding, His bag of holding opened on its own and a scroll floated out. The scroll opened up in the air. The figure of a woman slowly appeared inside the scroll. Wang Lin didn't look at the scroll. There wasn't even a trace of surprise on his face. There was endless calmness on his face. The moment before the scroll appeared, he closed his palm and the small, white ball entered his body. Go down. He couldn't see the front side of the woman, but her voice slowly spread. Her voice was like mist as it echoed in the crack. Wang Lin didn't speak. His finger formed a sword and swung down. This action was very simple, but Wang Lin's body was in a mysterious mental state. After that simple swing, the scroll immediately closed and no more sound came from inside it. Wang Lin withdrew his finger. After looking at the scroll, he grabbed it and threw it into his bag of holding. During these 3 years, the woman inside the scroll had appeared a total of 4 times. Every time she appeared, she gave off this vague call. Wang Lin wasn't curious about what was at the bottom of the pit. His calm never disappeared. He didn't even check the mysterious transfer array below him a second time. Before he had enough strength, curiosity was the deadliest thing that could obliterate all existence. Wang Lin was waiting for the day when the suction force outside the crack weakened. There was no rule to the suction in this pit. If the suction could suddenly increase 2 years ago, then it could also suddenly decrease in a few years. He just needed to wait. Croaking sounds appeared next to Wang Lin. He lowered his head and his eyes lit up. Beside him was a palm-sized blue toad. This was the Thunder Toad. 1 year ago, the Thunder Toad awakened, so its body was now this size. The Thunder Toad was able to feel the change in Wang Lin the most. After it awakened, it refused to go back into the bag of holding and just stayed next to Wang Lin. Wang Lin suddenly shot out a bolt of lightning from his finger toward the Thunder Toad. The Thunder Toad opened its eyes and its tongue suddenly extended forth and pulled the lightning into its mouth. A rumbling sound came from the toad's belly and it revealed a comfortable expression. Wang Lin closed his eyes and immersed himself in his Tao. There were 2 parts to his Tao. The first was the underworld river, and the second was forming the soul of the underworld river. However, the so-called soul of the underworld river was merely just millions of soul fragments from the soul flag condensed together. It was still missing killing intent. Although the heavenly ghost had the viciousness, it wasn't enough for it to become the soul for Wang Lin's underworld river. This was because it was only vicious but lacked killing intent. A true soul for the underworld river is not the powerful kind. Most often it is the simple and weak souls that contain the most amount of ferocity and killing intent. Wang Lin pondered. If I can leave this place, I'll need to pay a visit to the mortal world to extract ferocity and killing intent to refine my own soul for my underworld river. Wang Lin opened his eyes. He looked outside the crack and slowly stretched out his right hand. His fingertips slowly reached toward the dividing line inside the crack. Although this dividing line was still within the cave, the moment his fingertips went past the line, he could feel the pain of his body being pulled. Ripples began to appear on his skin, and even his nails felt like they were being pulled off. I have been trapped here, but this gave me a chance to comprehend the power of the heavens and earth, a chance to reach the 3rd step in my Tao. Although Wang Lin's eyes were calm, there was a hint of coldness in them. But before this, I must completely eliminate the issue in my body. Wang Lin withdrew his hand. This hand was completely numb and he had lost feeling in it completely. To be safe, he had stored all of the Celestial Slaughter Art inside the puppet. The Celestial Slaughter Art was a very important spell for Wang Lin. He only gave it up after struggling with the decision for a long time. Before, when he was cultivating the Celestial Slaughter Art, Wang Lin gained the Heart of Slaughter. At the start, the Heart of Slaughter didn't change even when Wang Lin gave all the slaughter energy to the puppet. However, after 3 years, which was several months ago, Wang Lin felt that the Heart of Slaughter had changed. This kind of change would make Wang Lin go crazy, like when he absorbed all those Celestial Ascension fruits. 1. The fruit Wang Lin ate that made him go crazy. It would even give him the urge to immediately take back all the slaughter energy. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. Then he revealed a decisive gaze and took a step. This step brought him past the dividing line. Powerful suction force suddenly tore at Wang Lin's body to drag him out of the crack. Wang Lin activated the celestial spiritual energy inside his body and slowly sat down. While resisting the suction force, he was slowly feeling the change of the suction force. There was a cold energy inside the suction force that entered his body. This chill wasn't strong and could be dispersed with celestial spiritual energy. After sitting there for a few days, Wang Lin took another step. This time he was at a position where the suction was even greater. All the blood in his body slowed down as if it was about to be pulled out of his body. Still not enough. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. Countless mosquito beasts filled up the space next to the entrance to the bottomless pit. They didn't dare go too close, as the suction force was too powerful. If they got too close, they would be sucked into the pit. Among this herd of mosquitoes there was a mosquito beast giving off a violent, purple light. Wherever it flew, the other mosquitoes made way for it, and it could cause the other mosquitoes to tremble with just a cry. However, this purple mosquito beast had an anxious expression as it wandered around the entrance to the pit for 3 years. There were several instances where it wanted to go into the pit, but after looking at its companions, it stopped. Bursts of cries would come out from its mouth and echo around the area. Like someone separated from their family calling out their family members' names, the powerful suction from outside was pulling at Wang Lin's body. The opening to the crack was like the mouth of a beast that wanted to devour Wang Lin. The suction was so powerful that his clothes and hair were being pulled toward the crack. There were uneven bumps under Wang Lin's skin. It was his blood and flesh being affected by the suction force. Wang Lin sat in the lotus position for 7 days. During these 7 days, he got used to the degree of suction at this spot. On this day, he opened his eyes and took another step. He stepped directly into the area within 10 feet of the opening of the crack. The powerful suction suddenly surrounded him. Wang Lin's body tilted slightly as if there was a pair of invisible hands dragging him. Wang Lin's expression was gloomy as he slowly sat down. He adjusted himself to resist the suction. The blood flow in his body had almost stopped. If it wasn't for the celestial spiritual energy inside him, many parts of his body would be injured right now. Still not enough. Wang Lin pondered for a moment before stopping the celestial spiritual energy inside his body. As soon as he did so, he was pulled out of the crack. At the moment his body arrived at the edge of the crack, Wang Lin slapped his bag of holding. The 7 swords immediately flew out and formed a formation. All 7 swords fell like arrows and stabbed into the ground around Wang Lin. Strands of lightning connected the 7 swords and held Wang Lin in place. The amount of lightning between the swords increased until it formed a net that wrapped around Wang Lin. Wang Lin slowly sat down inside the 7-star sword formation. He was already sitting at the edge of the crack. The cold aura filled the area and the loud whistling of the suction force echoed in his ears. Wang Lin's origin soul was already grabbed by the suction force and seemed to show signs of being sucked out. However, at this moment, the barrier that appeared before appeared once more, trapping his origin soul inside his body. Aside from his origin being pulled, even the slaughter intent seemed to condense and was gradually being pulled out. This slaughter intent came from the heart of slaughter. It formed into red lights and could be seen under Wang Lin's skin. After a long time, Wang Lin's eyes lit up and he moved forward 3 feet. Even the 7 swords moved with him. The suction force increased once more and another red line appeared under Wang Lin's skin. The powerful suction force surrounded Wang Lin's 7 swords, causing them to let out bursts of sword hymns. The spirits inside the sword came out and merged together. They didn't stay in one form but constantly changed shape to resist the suction force. In addition to this, the lightning connecting the 7 swords crackled as the swords linked closer together. The 7 swords seemed to have fused with the ground as they moved forward. As Wang Lin moved forward, more and more red lines appeared under his skin. They became dense and appeared everywhere, making his entire body red. There were so many red lines that if one were to count them all, there would be 1 million. Exactly the same as the amount of slaughter energy. The red lines under Wang Lin's skin flashed, but his mind was calm and he took a deep breath. At this moment, he reached the edge of the crack, but it was still not enough to force the slaughter intent out of his body, only enough to expose it. Looking at the world of darkness outside the crack, Wang Lin's eyes lit up. This light allowed him to see 200 feet down to a rock that was sticking out from the wall. The ancient transfer array was on this rock. After silently calculating for a bit, Wang Lin jumped out of the crack. His figure moved like lightning as he charged straight for the big rock 200 feet away. The 7-star sword formation followed Wang Lin out of the crack. The powerful suction force from the bottom of the pit immediately increased like crazy. The suction force here was countless times stronger, and in an instant some of the red lines were pulled out of Wang Lin's body. The moment the red lines left Wang Lin's body, they began to wiggle as if they were struggling. However, they all immediately turned into red gas and disappeared into the bottom of the pit. At the same time, the 7-sword formation spun rapidly around Wang Lin. The speed of the spinning reached an extreme speed, creating a powerful vortex. The vortex created a pushing force, and the force became stronger and stronger. Wang Lin, still inside the sword formation, took a step toward the large rock. He was completely focused and didn't want to be distracted. If he were to make one mistake, he would be sucked into the deep pit. The surrounding area had dense, cold aura, and the suction force was even more amazing. It was as if there was a large hand pressing down from above and a large hand mercilessly pulling from below at the same time. The whistling was like the roar of the master of this place. The speed of the 7-star formation had reached a certain limit, but the force it produced wasn't enough to resist the suction. Wang Lin's body was pulled down along with the sword formation. At this moment, Wang Lin's eyes lit up and a black figure suddenly appeared under his feet. This figure seemed closely connected to Wang Lin, and it began to mutter and form a seal with its hands. In an instant, the black figure created a powerful tornado that was powerful enough to stop the suction force for a moment. It carried Wang Lin and the sword formation toward the giant rock. After stepping on the large rock, Wang Lin let out a breath of relief. The combination of the sword formation and the puppet could resist the suction force, but not for a long period of time. Wang Lin sat down on the rock. He didn't have any time to study the transfer array on the rock, so he focused on forcing the red lines out of his body. His eyes lit up and he waved his hand. The tornado suddenly disappeared into the puppet that was hiding in Wang Lin's shadow. The 7 swords spun rapidly around Wang Lin after the tornado disappeared. Without the tornado, Wang Lin once again felt the incredible suction force. He clenched his teeth and the veins on his face bulged. He looked rather ferocious at the moment. Even more red lines in his body were pulled out. They seemed to have intelligence as they struggled, but ultimately they were all pulled out of Wang Lin's body. These red lines all exploded into red mist and disappeared. It was as if Wang Lin had suddenly grown red fur, as countless wiggling red lines were pulled partially out of his body. This scene was extremely strange. As the red lines were pulled out one by one, the red mist before Wang Lin never ceased to appear. At the moment one cloud of red mist was pulled away, another would appear. This repeated over and over again. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lin's skin was no longer all red and gradually revealed some skin color. Wang Lin let out a deep breath and suddenly opened his eyes. The puppet appeared from his shadow and once more created a tornado, then it brought him back to the crack. After struggling to enter the crack, Wang Lin arrived in a place inside the crack without any suction force. He was weakened. It was as if he had just battled against a late-stage ascendant cultivator for 10 days and 10 nights. In the past several days, Wang Lin had to resist the power of the suction force, manipulate the 7-star sword formation, force the red lines out of his body, and also cycle celestial spiritual energy inside his body to stabilize himself. Doing all of this at once made Wang Lin extremely tired. He knew that he might make a mistake and doom himself if he continued, so he decided to simply rest first, and once he was in peak he would continue. After adjusting himself for a bit, Wang Lin's eyes lit up. He controlled the 7-sword formation and walked out of the crack once more. This continued for several months. On this day, Wang Lin had been trapped here for 4 years. He was sitting on a large rock in the pit, and under the skin in his right hand there was a red line. The red line trembled under the suction force. It seemed to let out an unwilling cry as it was pulled out through the fingertip and turned into red mist. This was the last strand of red line inside his body. The moment it was forced out, Wang Lin opened his. His eyes revealed how tired he was, but there was a flash of coldness as well. Celestial slaughter art. He pondered for a long time and the coldness in his eyes slowly hid itself. Then he lowered his head and looked at the transfer array. After taking one look, he no longer paid any attention to it and slowly felt the surrounding suction force. Only after integrating with the suction force could he feel the subtle changes inside the suction force. If he wanted to learn about the suction force, he would have to open up his mist and not resist it. He had to become transparent so that the suction could pass through his body. Day after day, year after year. Wang Lin sat here for 3 years. The 7-star sword formation no longer spun and had stabbed into the ground around him. Wang Lin seemed to have become one with the rock. At first the suction force could cause him to move a little, but gradually it was as if Wang Lin had become transparent. The suction force would just go through his body. Time slipped past and another 3 years went by. The suction force went through Wang Lin without stopping and rushed toward the bottom. Not even his clothes and hair were moved by the suction force like they were 3 years ago. Not only did his body not move, but his mind also didn't move at all. During these past 6 years, as Wang Lin sat here and felt the suction force going through all parts of his body, he gradually entered a mysterious state. He had a feeling that he had completely disappeared. It was because he had disappeared that the suction had no effect on him at all. However, the suction force still couldn't pass through his origin soul. It was because of this that Wang Lin still had a feeling of not being complete while in this mysterious state. He could make the suction force pass through his body and make his body become one with the suction force. However, he couldn't make it pass through his origin soul and consciousness and truly become one with the suction force. However, Wang Lin wasn't in a rush. He continued to calmly comprehend the suction force. Under this mysterious state, he gradually allowed his origin soul to disperse. Another 5 years passed by in a flash. He had been stranded here for 15 years. He had sat on that large rock for 11 years. His origin soul still completely dispersed and had completely become one with the suction force. On the 17th year since Wang Lin had been trapped here, he opened his eyes. His eyes revealed a trace of vicissitude and calmly looked at the darkness before him. The fusion of my mind and the suction force. This won't happen if there is the slightest bit of rejection. To understand the suction force and truly integrate with it, I must become part of the suction force. Once I become the suction force, I will have fused with it. Wang Lin pondered. He had already considered this many years ago. It sounded easy, but actually doing it was very difficult. He had no idea where to begin to make himself part of the suction force. Wang Lin had already grown accustomed to the whistling sound over the last 17 years. The whistling was the voice of the suction. Wang Lin let out a deep breath and closed his eyes. Go down, that woman's voice echoed inside his origin soul once more. Wang Lin suddenly opened his eyes, and his eyes gave off lightning. He lowered his head and looked down at the darkness below him. The light in his eyes became brighter and brighter. At the moment the brightness reached its peak, it suddenly dissipated. Wang Lin slowly stood up after not moving for 13 years and stepped forward. He didn't use any spell with this step, he was like a mortal stepping off a cliff and into the void. His body immediately fell toward the bottom of the pit, and his figure was devoured by the darkness. Wang Lin's body rapidly fell, and during this he closed his eyes. The suction force was like many large hands mercilessly dragging him down. As he fell, it became even colder. There was even frost on the walls here. Wang Lin turned a blind eye to all of this. His entire mind was immersed in that mysterious state. The only thought in his mind was to completely become one with the suction force. Fuse with the suction force. Transform into the suction force. Become the suction force. At this moment, Wang Lin's origin soul released countless thunderous booms. The suction force went through his body like crazy and moved through his origin soul. At this moment, Wang Lin opened his eyes. Although his body was sinking, he revealed a faint smile. He took a deep breath, and at this moment, his body stopped falling. The suction force went through his body and no longer obstructed him at all. His origin soul, his flesh, everything about him had fused with the suction force. He was part of the suction force. He looked down and saw that there was no bottom. There was only an endless abyss that looked like it could devour all existence in the world. It is about time to leave. My Dao's third ability is the power of the underworld. Wang Lin raised his head until he was looking up and gradually began to rise. Go down. I'm begging you. Go down. For the first time, there was emotion in the woman's voice. Wang Lin stopped. I'm begging you to go down. Take me down. There was sadness and urgency in that voice. Wang Lin pondered. This voice that had disappeared for 13 years echoed in his mind once more. During the 13 years that he was comprehending the suction force, this woman never spoke. However, her words now contained emotions that weren't there before. He touched the bag of holding with his right hand and the scroll flew out. The scroll gave off a soft light, and the suction force had no effect on it. The scroll opened up, revealing the woman's backside. For the first time, Wang Lin carefully looked at the woman inside the scroll. Although it was only a figure, her figure contained the aura of someone with peerless elegance. I'm begging you, take me down. I can't leave this scroll, so you won't be in danger. I just want to take a look. Wang Lin pondered and didn't speak. I can't help you with anything, I can't give you anything, but I beg you to take me down there. Wang Lin lowered his head and looked at the bottom. It was completely dark down there and extremely cold. I can't help you. If you want to leave, then go. Wang Lin shook his head and no longer looked at the scroll as he headed up. He had too many things to do. He had opened all the restrictions inside the cave before the Allseer and company arrived at the demon spirit land so he could enter the real cave. Although he didn't know when the Allseer and company would arrive, in his conversation with Yao Shishue, he managed to get a few clues, and it seemed like the Allseer and company were going to arrive soon. Before they arrive, Wang Lin must finish his preparations. He was short on time and he had no time to waste on curiosity. Moreover, he had to make sure the Allseer doesn't see through him so he could safely leave this demon spirit land. If he makes one mistake, the price will be his life. He had too little time. The woman inside the scroll trembled. She wanted to turn, but there was a seal controlling her. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't turn around. Seeing Wang Lin flying higher and higher until he was about to disappear, she bit her lip and softly said, "You. Don't you want to know the true history of the bead inside your origin soul?" Although her voice was soft, it was still heard clearly by Wang Lin. Those words were like 10,000 thunderclaps roaring inside his mind, causing him to suddenly stop. Don't you want that woman's broken soul to revive? If what he heard earlier was 10,000 thunderclaps roaring inside his mind, then this was 100,000, 1 million, 10 million thunderclaps exploding inside him, shaking even his origin soul. His origin soul, his memories, his everything instantly erupted like a monstrous flood at that second sentence. It was as if the entire sky had collapsed. Even with Wang Lin's mental strength, he couldn't stop his body from trembling. He turned around and looked at the woman. His eyes were like those of a wild beast and no longer contained the calmness from his 800 years of cultivation. At this moment, what Allseer, what cave, what blood ancestor, what demon spirit land? At this moment all of it collapsed, and the only thing that existed was Wang Lin's crazed gaze at the woman. What did you say? A hoarse voice spoken in a tone that never left Wang Lin before came out of his mouth. These simple four words revealed an indescribable feeling. At this moment, even the howling of the suction force that had existed for countless years seemed to weaken. The woman softly said, "I can tell you the origin of the bead, I can tell you the method to resurrecting the soul inside the bead, I can even give you the opportunity to leave here." Wang Lin closed his eyes. He didn't want to think about whether the woman's words were true or false. He didn't want to know why she knew all his secrets, he didn't want to. When he opened his eyes, he didn't speak as he took a step, grabbed the scroll, and quickly flew toward the bottom of the pit. Even if there was only a slim chance, he would fight for it. A person will always have one thing where no matter how clever he is, his calm will immediately collapse. Even when facing endless danger, facing life and death, he will still have to keep on persisting. Wang Lin was still a person. He wasn't a merciless celestial or a ruthless god. After cultivating for more than 800 years, his calmness had already seeped into his bones and become his natural state. He could calmly leave planet Suzaku and ruthlessly leave Ju Ryu a bag waiting for the day she opens it. He could calmly face all enemies. No matter how powerful they are, they won't be able to shake his Dao heart in the slightest. However, there was one power that could crush this calmness of his. Only after one loses something do they realize they wanted it. Only after one has lost something do they realize that they had always wanted to cherish it. If someone was always calm, rational, and unwavering, then would that someone still be considered a person? Wang Lin couldn't do it. With sadness in his eyes, he grabbed the scroll and charged down the pit like a meteor. At this moment he didn't want to think, he wasn't willing to try and distinguish true from false. The woman inside the scroll let out a sigh and softly said, "You can rest assured that I'm not deceiving you. I made a big decision to even tell you all of this." Wang Lin didn't speak, and his grip on the scroll became even tighter. It was as if he wasn't holding onto a scroll, but to hope. The coldness coming from the wall was even stronger and the suction force was greater. An unknown amount of time had passed, and the pit really seemed bottomless. No matter how far he descended, there was only darkness that seemed to extend on forever. Almost there. Almost there, the woman's voice was trembling. At this location, the suction force was unimaginably strong. Wang Lin's body flew by along with the suction force. After a long time, perhaps it was a day, perhaps it was a month, perhaps it was a year. A short corridor appeared in the darkness below. There was a giant vortex in this corridor. The vortex was slowly rotating, and the suction force came from the vortex. What was mysterious was that the suction force seemed to be sealed here as there wasn't the slightest bit of suction force here. It seemed like only after a certain distance from the vortex would the suction force suddenly become stronger. At the moment Wang Lin looked at the vortex, a strange force came from inside the scroll and entered his body. The power condensed in his eyes, and at this moment his eyes could penetrate the vortex to see inside it. A starry sky with countless cultivation planets. It looked like another world. Wang Lin looked at the vortex and was moved. At this moment, he recovered his calmness. The woman inside the scroll softly said, "My hometown. All Heaven Star System, 1. Don't think too hard about it, it's just a name and it's never explained what the name means. Star System." This video will end here.